Hello. I've been wanting for a while to make videos where I slow things down a bit and show how I do specific things in my mini sculpts. And that's what I'm doing here today. I'm making a sword for a mini, and this video will focus on my process for making swords. I don't make them out of clay like other mini sculpting tutorials you'll find on YouTube. Let's get into it though. I'm starting off with some steel wire, 18 gauge. I could just leave it straight, but I want to make a thicker, heftier blade, so I'm bending it in half, and the fold will be the tip of the blade when I'm done. I want to really squeeze the pliers to get that fold really tight, and maybe even whack it a bit with a hammer. The crease between the two lengths of wire will be the sword's fuller. I want the blade of the sword to be fairly flat, and I'm going to achieve that by hammering it out. I'm using an iron hex weight here as my anvil, and I prepped that square that I hammer wire on by grinding away the layer of paint. Otherwise, I'd end up with little bits of paint driven into the wire. I've learned by trial and error that wire almost always bends away from me when I'm hammering it. So by flipping it over now and then, I can get it to bend back the other way for a straighter result. I also sometimes use this adapter here for socket attachments to make my strikes more precise when hammering, or sometimes I'll use a square-shaped screwdriver bit to get even more precise strikes. And every once in a while, I'm using pliers to just get those two sides pinched back together. You have to do this fairly frequently as you hammer the wire out, or it will wander too far off from shape and not bend back to the alignment you want. Once I've got the blade hammered out to the length I want, and after some more squeezing the two lengths back together a little more, I just eyeballed the length I want the hilt to be and snip off the excess wire. If it looks too thick and not quite right, don't worry, I see that too and plan to clean it up a bit. Now I'm pulling out my grinding tool, or Dremel, to start shaping some of this hammered wire, starting with the hilt. I don't need to get it too perfect, just remove some mass to make room for the wrap. For the cross guard, I'm starting with some thinner steel wire, 26 gauge this time, and I just fold it across the sword at the base of the blade. As I then twist the crossed guard tighter and tighter, I'm trying to get it tight enough to get rid of the wiggle on the blade, without breaking the wire though as I twist it. To wrap the hilt, and I decided to do the cross guard as well, I'm using even thinner wire, some 28 gauge gold colored copper wire. Sewing thread also works great for this, and if you do use sewing thread, you'll need to use some way of gluing it to the hilt. When I do that, I usually tie a sliding knot into the thread, I loop it over the hilt, pull the thread tight, wrap it nice and tight around the hilt, and while holding the thread tight with my thumb, I coat the whole wrap in varnish. And once it dries, thread works very well for that. I mentioned that I wrap the same wire around the cross guard, which I will do later, but for now I need that cross guard folded down out of the way so I can grind the blade. When shaping the blade, my first step is getting the edges straight. I'm using a little grinding stone attachment here and other attachments as well, and just taking my time to get it into the shape I want. After that, I polish up the flat of the blade and then try to sharpen the edges a bit. I don't usually end up getting any edges or points particularly sharp, but if you want to take this blade to a proper whetstone, you could probably get a fairly sharp edge on it. This wrap on the crossguard, which again uses the 28 gauge copper wire, isn't just for looks. By getting it tight around the junction with the blade and hilt, I can pretty much totally eliminate any wiggle left in the crossguard. And for a finishing touch, I'm dabbing some glue onto a few spots on the hilt. This is shoe glue specifically, but I'm sure there are other glues that can achieve the same result. When the glue dries, I'm mixing up a puddle of watercolor paint and then using that to color some high gloss varnish, which I'll dab over the dried glue to make it look like a translucent green gem or crystal that are embedded in the hilt. And here it is. I hope you found this guide helpful. If you'd like to see more and to see how the complete mini who will be using this sword turns out, please keep an eye out on my channel. Thank you for watching.